Hi, it's Pastor Wagner again. Welcome to my video blog. Today I'd like to talk to you about how the doctrine is in the grammar when it comes to the scriptures. And I would like to look at the doctrine, at a doctrine that is affected and that is explained by the past participle construction that is in it. The past participle, let's define some terms. A participle is a word that partakes of the nature of a verb and an adjective. It's a derivative of a verb which has the function and construction of an adjective. So it's a verb that acts like an adjective. A verb is a word that is used to describe action, like I drink. Drink would be the verb. And an adjective is a word that describes a noun. So if I said I drink hot coffee, hot would be the adjective describing the noun coffee, drink would be the verb. Okay, so I think we all understand that from basic grammar. And we also want to look at the active voice versus the passive voice. Now an active voice would be I love coffee. That would be the active voice. I am the one performing the action. The passive voice would be coffee is loved of me. So the coffee then would be the object at which the verb is performed on. Coffee is loved of me. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to look at a few Bible verses, 3 of them in particular, and I want to look at how this same past participle, passive voice verb construction is used in these verses. So let's look at one of them. The first one is 1 John 2:29, and that says, "If ye know that he is righteous, ye know that every one that doeth righteousness is born of him." You see, every one that doeth righteousness is born of him. Now the word born is a past participle of the verb to bear. Born is to be brought forth as offspring, to come into the world. So that's a passive participle. That is a verb that can also be used as an adjective. It's a verb that can describe a person, like a person is born. Could be an adjective describing, a phrase describing the person. But notice it's to be brought forth as offspring. That's important. Now, is born is a passive voice past participle verb construction which describes a person as already having been passively brought forth as offspring and come into the world. You see that it describes the condition of a person, born, that they have been passively brought into existence. It's the passive voice past participle construction. Now, if I were to say, a baby which cries for his mother is born of her, it's obvious that being born of her came before the baby cried, isn't it? So when I say the baby that cries is born of her, it's not saying that he got born of her because he cried. It's saying that he cried because he is born of her. The is born obviously preceded the crying. That's pretty obvious, I think. So getting back to this 1 John 2:29, you know that every one that doeth righteousness is born of him. Question: which came first, being born of God or doing righteousness? Well, it's obvious that being born of God came first. See, the doing righteousness is the evidence of being born of God, not the cause. I think we would all agree with that. We all know that salvation is not of works. It's not of doing righteousness. So the doing righteousness is just the evidence of being born of God, which came first. Let's look at another verse. 1 John 4 and verse 7. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God." You see that? Every one that loveth is born of God. Now, with the same information, we know that is born of God. Is born is a passive voice, past participle construction. So, question once again, with what we've already learned, which came first, being born of God or loving the brethren? Well, it's obvious. Being born of God comes before loving the brethren. Loving the brethren is the evidence that a person is born of God. It's not the cause. Being born comes first, obviously. You do things after you're born. That makes sense. We would all agree with that, I think. Now, one more verse. 1 John 5:1. "Whoso believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and every one that loveth him that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him." You see that? Whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God. Same exact construction as the previous 2 verses. Is born of God. Now we've already seen that he that doeth righteousness is born of him. And we've already admitted, oh yes, the doing righteousness comes after being born of God, obviously. He that loveth is born of God. Loving, obviously, comes after being born of God. It's the evidence, not the cause of being born of God. Now question, which came first? Being born of God or believing that Jesus is the Christ? Remember, we've already seen this in two identical constructions in two verses prior to this. So which came first, being born of God or believing that Jesus is the Christ? It's obvious that being born of God came first. So we see that believing that Jesus is the Christ is the evidence that one is born of God. It's that baby crying for his mother that shows that he is born of her. Believing that Jesus is the Christ shows that one is born of God. It's the evidence, not the cause. Thanks. If you need any more information, you can always check out my website, our church's website, at www.minneapolischurch.net. And there's more information on this doctrine of the sovereign grace of God. Thank you.